Okay, in this next few videos, I just want to take you through answering some particularly difficult questions related to policies from this year to achieve each of the goals, but also around how effective we've been with budgetary policy in achieving some of these goals, as well as how effective we've been in achieving our medium-term fiscal strategy. So first of all, what is the forecasted budget outcome for the last 2 years, and is it considered expansionary or contractionary? The forecasted budget deficit for this year is $29.4 billion. That's down from $37.6 billion last year. This implies a relatively contractionary budget, as there is a smaller gap between expenditure and revenues, which may be indicative of the government's move towards fiscal consolidation. Having said that, the main reasons for the smaller deficits are cyclical reasons. So they've been due to slightly lower unemployment and the slight rise in commodity prices this year. The majority of discretionary measures within the budget have been quite expansionary, which implies that despite the reduction in the deficit, this budget has an expansionary feel to it. One other thing you need to be able to do is to describe discretionary budgetary policies from each budget that should help to achieve each of the goals. So the first one is the goal of strong and sustainable economic growth. You need to be able to define the goal first. It will always get you 1 mark. So strong and sustainable economic growth is the fastest rate of economic growth consistent with an increase in employment that will not cause excessive inflationary, environmental or external pressures. And one thing that we're doing this year is our constant commitment to infrastructure spending. As part of our consistent $70 billion we're going to spend in infrastructure, the government has implemented many new road and rail projects this year. And you need to be able to explain them. You need to be able to explain 3 policies that they've implemented related to infrastructure this year, once you've defined the goal of strong and sustainable growth. The key ones that I would be focusing on is they have spent $8.4 billion on an inland rail project between Brisbane and Melbourne. They have spent $10 billion on a national rail program, helping to fund regional areas, which includes upgrades to things like the Bruce Highway and the Monash Freeway, as well as the M80 Ring Road. Okay, as I said, remember 2 or 3 at least of these infrastructure projects. They've also spent $500 million on Victorian Regional Passage Rail and $30 million to help build a link towards the Tullamarine Airport. And the other key policy that I would be remembering is they spent $5.2 billion to build the West Sydney Airport, which is hoping to create around 20,000 jobs by 2026. So the key thing to remember is the Brisbane to Melbourne Inland Rail Network, the $5.2 billion spent on the new Sydney Airport, as well as some roads and railways for regional Victoria, including the Tullamarine link. In the short term, this is likely to boost G2 spending as well as investment spending, which should help to create additional jobs in the economy. The additional jobs would generate more income, boosting consumption spending as well. In the long term, though, the idea of infrastructure spending is to boost our productive capacity. So it should allow for non-inflationary growth in the long term, as it helps to reduce bottlenecks and helps to boost our productivity as we can transport things more efficiently around the economy. And that's the key, that you mentioned both the short and long-term impacts on economic growth. Once you've mentioned some key policies, define the goal, and you've got a good, sophisticated, in-depth answer to that question. A policy that can be used to boost skills from the last 2 budgets. Again, if you're looking at last year's budget, you're talking about the Youth Jobs Path. You need to explain the 3 steps. So the first one was 6 weeks of job preparation, followed by an internship of 4 to 12 weeks. Throughout the internship, the employer gets a wage subsidy of up to $10,000, while the employee or the person on welfare can get up to $200 per week. At the end of the program, they can also offer a job to workers, and if they do, they can get a subsidy of up to $10,000. The idea of this is to create an extra 120,000 opportunities for young people. In terms of this year's budget, the budget has focused on changing the 457 visa scheme. So now we have the new temporary skilled visa scheme, where if you hire someone from overseas, you have to pay a levy, and that levy goes towards the Skilled Australians Fund, with the idea of providing extra training and apprenticeships to Australian workers. Again, this is designed to help boost our skills, which should help to boost productivity in the long term. Policies for achieving price stability. If you're looking for two policies, you can focus on infrastructure spending and quote the same things and how that will help to boost productivity going forward. But the key policy to use is the extension of the accelerated depreciation allowances. So define the goal of price stability. It's 2 to 3% CPI inflation over the course of the business cycle. This wasn't something people defined very well in the second SAC this year. 2 to 3% CPI over the course of the business cycle. The accelerated depreciation allowances allow businesses to immediately depreciate their assets, valued at up to $20,000, which they can then use to effectively reduce their tax liability. In the long term, this should help firms to invest in new machinery and equipment, which should help to boost our productivity and reduce firms' costs of production. So despite the fact it might cause more demand pull inflation in the short term, it should reduce cost push inflationary pressures going forward. A second policy would be the infrastructure spending, which includes the $8.4 billion Brisbane Inland Rail project, as well as upgrades to the Bruce Highway and Monash Freeway, which will again reduce bottlenecks and capacity constraints and make us more productive going forward.